Hello, Aubrey. How's everything going today?
I'm great. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling solid, ready for the weekend. What about you?
Excellent. Yes, I feel the same. I am ready for a weekend. And I have a question for you. This is
Yes.
interesting. Who are you able to rely upon in your life?
To rely upon. Interesting. Well, I'm lucky to have a lot of people to rely upon. Certainly, my parents have always been steady for me. I could always go to them, and I feel lucky about that. And then my
Mm.
partner, my spouse, I can certainly rely upon. My brother, I'd say when things get into a jam, I can go to him,
Oh,
even
that's
though we're not
amazing. You have a
super
lot of
close.
people. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's a good question though, isn't it? Kind of formal
Yes.
sounding almost.
It is a little formal sounding. We got this question about the word upon in English. Did
Mhm.
did that feel natural to you, or do you feel like I would more likely to say, who are you able to rely on in your life?
I would have expected you to say rely on because rely
Yes.
upon makes it feel a little more poetic, a little more elevated, and we're just kinda chatting as friends here, right? On the
Exactly.
podcast? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, a grammatical error, but it
Yeah.
just makes it that much more formal that when you're just chatting with a friend, it does
Yeah.
feel a little like,
Strange.
why are you saying it that way? I would more likely say rely on, but both are correct. So this is going to be
Mhm.
interesting to dive into. When do we use upon? Why do we use upon? Because this can be really confusing.
Oh, for sure. So we got a question from a listener. Can I read it? Aubrey, are
Yes,
we
let's
ready?
do
All
it.
right. I
Yeah.
love reading listener questions. I just
Nice.
love it. Oh. All right, here we go. First of all, congrats for the show. I downloaded All Ears English about a month ago. It's a new listener.
Yeah.
I love it and I listen to it every single day when I'm driving to work. Amazing.
Yes.
And he says, I'd like you guys to explain a little bit about the word upon and how to use it exactly. I've always had a hard time understanding it. Thank you, Edson Net.
Yes,
Great
I love this
question.
question. I love
Yeah.
when a question is something that I have not thought about before in English, and this is one of those things. I'm like, "Oh, okay, we use upon. Gotta think about, like, when do I use it? Why do I use it?" So it was an
Yes.
interesting, deep dive that I did to
Yeah.
figure out, why do we
Yeah.
use upon?
Yeah, thank you, Edson, for pushing us to think about, the English language. And now we're going to go into it today, Aubrey, right? So what do we need to know about upon? What kind
Yeah,
of
so it's
word is it?
very, interchangeable with on in many of the ways that we use it. It's a preposition. Often,
Mhm.
we could replace it with on,
Hmm.
but it makes it just a little bit more formal. Like we were saying with rely upon, you could say the research was, we relied upon research for this survey. You could also just say we relied on research for this survey. And the
Yeah.
meaning is the same, but it's just a little more formal.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's pretty interchangeable. When you want to elevate things a little bit more, we stick in upon, right?
Exactly, or based on versus based upon. The research
Oh,
was
yeah.
based upon 2 surveys. That sounds very natural to me because it's sort of academic. We're talking about a research paper. We're maybe speaking more formally depending on the situation. But if it's just 2 friends talking, you'd probably say based on.
That's actually interesting. I was flying back from California late Sunday night and we were watching The Devil Wears Prada. It's always on the airlines. I love it.
Yes.
And at the beginning of the movie, it said based upon the novel by XYZ. There's so many movies that are based upon novels, but my point is they always say usually they say based upon the novel by, not based on, which is
Yes, and
interesting.
right when we're writing, we usually are just a little bit more formal. If we're
Yeah.
in an academic setting, maybe in a business meeting or interview,
Mhm.
we might be a little more formal. But if you said to me, "Oh, the book I'm reading is based, or this movie was based,"
Based
you'd probably say based
on.
on, was based
Exactly.
on this book
Exactly.
because it's more conversational.
That's a good differentiator right there. So the credits of a movie before or after the movie, you're going to see based upon. But if you and I are chatting, oh, did you see that movie? Did you know it's based on this book? That's what's going to
Exactly, and they
happen.
mean
Yeah.
the same thing, both
Mhm.
correct. Whenever we're writing or in a formal situation, we might opt for upon just to up level our
Yeah.
English, be a little bit more formal.
Well, it's good for our listeners to have options, guys. This is what brings you to 99% fluency and connection is to know the difference and to have options. That's what we're doing today. Yeah.
Exactly. And there are actually 4 different ways we use upon in English. This, what we've been talking about, is the first way, where it
Mm.
just means the same as on, but is a little bit more formal. This
Mhm.
is sort of abstract, the way we've been talking about so far, based on, rely upon, based upon, but it can be more literal. You could say, he set the flowers upon the table. And if you're reading a
Ooh.
poem or seeing something written, it might be this way. But in normal conversation, we'd probably just say, he set the flowers on the table.
Yeah, he set the flowers upon the table. It sounds a little too sing-songy, a little too
Flowery.
novel-ish. It's a novel,
Totally.
right? It's set the beach
Mhm.
setting
Sounds
novel.
literary.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's not the only way you use it, right? So let's get into the others here. What's the
Yep.
second way we use this,
Okay.
Lindsay? Upon.
Okay, so meaning up and on. Interesting. Upward so as to get or be on something. So, tell me more
Exactly.
here.
Like, for
Mhm.
example, he climbed upon the horse, right?
Ooh,
This is
yeah.
interesting. We use it to mean getting up and on something. We use the
Mhm.
preposition upon instead. Now, of course, there
Hmm.
are less formal versions here as well. I might be more likely to say he climbed onto the horse just because of where I grew up, but this is grammatically correct as well. And you might hear someone say he climbed upon the horse.
It also though it still has the highbrow sort of sing-songy literature-ish
Absolutely.
feeling to it, right? So the other thing I might say here is he climbed up onto the horse. He climbed up
Yes.
onto the horse. So
More conversational. Yes, and you might say, like, oh, maybe you're reading a book and it says, "The circus performer rode upon the elephant's back,"
oh, it's really
right? And
it's
just like you
really
said,
yeah.
this grammatically correct, but if I were to just say this to someone, I'd probably say, "The circus performer rode on the elephant's back."
Yeah, you might if you said that to someone conversationally, you might sound a little out of touch because you're almost reciting a poem. It
Right? "Why are you
Do
speaking
you know
so
what I
slowly to
mean?
me?"
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Occasionally, I'll, like, talk to someone who kinda speaks that way, and it feels a little weird. If that's
Yeah.
your
Well, it
personality, then go with it, but I don't know,
True,
you know?
but I think there is a little bit of a risk to break the connection a little bit. If it
Yeah,
feels just a little bit awkward, like you're sort of making the situation
yeah,
more formal, that's, not always the best way to build connection. We want to feel comfortable in our conversations. So this is one of the key points about upon. You want to understand how it's used, but you don't want to throw it into conversation all the time because you are making it more formal.
100%. That's why connection mattered. That's it. That's the connection piece right there. Right, Aubrey?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, number 3. What is the 3rd way? Aubrey?
Yes. So we also use upon when we're talking about something that is going to be experienced or dealt with very soon. Like, for
Mm,
example, we might say, another few weeks and spring will be upon us. And I do
yes.
use it this way in
Me
conversation,
too.
right? Something
Yeah.
will soon, Christmas is upon us, right?
Yes.
Meaning like it's here or it's coming very soon. So this is an
Yeah.
interesting way that we use upon.
Yeah, I've had this feeling in the last couple of days. Yesterday and today, it's sunny and 65. And I have this feeling spring is upon us. It's right now we're recording this on March 1st, a few a few weeks back from the date this publishes. But it does have that feeling right now in the
Yes.
air. Spring is upon us. And then the snowstorm comes, right? That's how it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, right? Or you might say exams will be upon you before you know it. Better get studying if your kids, I've said this to my daughter recently. She has AP exams soon. They'll be
Really.
upon you before you know it. Get studying, right?
I
Means
mean,
it's
it's already
impending.
March. I mean, the end of the year is coming. The end of the school year is not that far away.
Right?
It will be upon us very
Yes.
soon, Aubrey.
And there's
So
a little grammar note here. In this case, you can't just replace it with on. You can't say like spring is on us. No.
no, no, no,
But
no,
you
no.
could replace it with, you could say spring will be here soon. So it's a different meaning.
Yeah, for sure. And spring will be here soon is also, I would say, is still more casual than spring is upon us, will be upon us. But this is the most accessible way to use upon when you're talking about moving into a new time, period.
Exactly. This is used more commonly, even in day-to-day speech, right? When we
Yeah.
just say something is upon us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now the next one, this is interesting. This is the 4th way, right? It's when
Mhm.
we know that something happens soon after and because of something else, right?
Exactly. So, for example, upon hearing the alarm, we all evacuated the building.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say, when we heard the alarm, we evacuated the building. This is more conversational, more likely to be heard. Again, a little more literary to say, upon hearing
Yeah.
the alarm, they evacuated.
Yeah, it really seems like most of these scenarios where we use upon is more formal, more literary,
Mhm.
more I don't know, kind of elevated, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, right, you
And
might
then
hear someone say, "Upon arrival at the airport, they went straight to
mhm,
baggage claim," and you will hear this, TV, movies, podcasts, every now and then someone will
yeah,
throw this into a more of a daily speech type of scenario, but it
sure.
is, a little more formal than just saying when they arrived, they went to
Right.
baggage claim.
Or you might also see this if you're on like a group tour, they're always going to send you, upon checking in at the hotel, you'll be served a welcome drink, right? It's a little more
Exactly.
formal than, "Hey, when you check in, you'll get your drink."
Right,
Okay?
especially if that's written in an
Written
itinerary,
in it.
they
That's what
would
I
be
mean. Yeah.
much more likely to write it that more formal way.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Do we have a bonus here? Ooh, I like this one.
Yeah,
What's our
we just
bonus?
wanna note the where you will hear upon the most often is once upon a time, which
Nice.
is a phrase that's used to introduce a narrative of past events, both in speech. I will say this sometimes in the
Mhm.
role play in just a minute, you're gonna hear how it might come up in a conversation, but
Yeah.
mostly in stories.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like every kid story starts this way, right? Or
Exactly.
used to. Probably not anymore, but
Yeah,
historically, the old classics start this way. Once upon a time,
right.
there was a girl, and yes,
And
yes,
I was
100%.
curious when that started, how long this has been used in books. It's been since 1380,
Oh, you
according
researched that.
to
Very
Oxford
cool.
English Dictionary, that stories have
Ah.
begun with once upon a time. So interesting.
That is really interesting, and I feel like maybe not as much now. Storytellers would also start original stories that way. Once upon a time, or telling a story to your kids. Do your kids ever ask you to
Absolutely.
tell them stories? Do you ever have to come up with something, Aubrey, off the cuff?
Yes, I do that
Yeah.
a lot, right? When they want to go to bed and they tell me a story, and so I make
Oh.
something, up, but often I get them to participate. I'll have them tell me a
Oh,
story, or I will start
yes.
it and have them continue, and then I'll pick it up again, and we sort of build it together. That's my favorite.
That's great. I would totally do that too. That makes a lot of sense. Also,
Yeah,
at the
for
end of
sure.
the night, you're tired. You're
I'm
like, "Come
tired.
on,
I
guys,
can
help
think
me
of
out
this
here."
whole story. Exactly.
Right. All right, role play time. Shall we do it?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is a little more of a somber occasion because
Mhm.
it would be strange to just throw upon in several times if it's a very light-hearted,
Yep.
casual conversation. So this
Yep.
role play is you and I are visiting, chatting after a funeral.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Here we go. Well, I'll miss your cousin. She was such a good friend.
Once upon a time, we were very close, but unfortunately, we haven't seen each other in years. She was definitely someone you could rely upon.
You did a really good job on the life sketch. Was it difficult to prepare that?
It was an emotional experience, but she had kept journals, so I was able to base it upon her writing, which was nice.
I'm glad I could be here. Immediately upon arrival, I ran into someone from high school. It's nice to see old friends who also knew her.
Nice. So
Okay.
this feels a little more natural to me. As I was writing the role play, I'm like, I can't just throw a pawn into daily
No.
conversation, right? But
Right.
this I could potentially see me using a pawn a few times when we're trying to be more respectful, a little more formal because we're speaking about someone who just passed.
Right. I think at the top of the episode, I actually thought about a funeral as being a context that this could make sense. So it's something a little elevated. You're trying to speak beyond just your everyday language, right?
Yes, exactly, and you
Yes.
might see,
Mhm.
in an obituary or in something written about the funeral upon her death, something, right, where we're
Mhm.
using this more elevated language.
Yeah, so you said here, Aubrey, you said once upon a time we were close, very close, but unfortunately we hadn't seen each other in years, right?
Yes, and this is interesting to use it this way. I'm not
That is
starting a
interesting.
story, right,
Right.
but I'm just saying, like, back in the day, another way of saying that, once upon a time, we were really close. Do you use it this way sometimes,
Yeah.
Lindsay?
I've heard it used this way.
Mhm.
I might when I'm trying to be human but also deep, I guess. Right?
Exactly, right? This
Yeah.
I thought was the kind of scenario where I might be, right? We are
Yeah.
sort of trying to show this respect. And also, this is clearly a conversation where you and I don't know each other that well. It's my cousin
Mm.
that has passed. You're a friend from high school in town. We don't know each other very well. So we are being a little more formal.
Yeah, and maybe there's also a hint of nostalgia in there in that once
Yeah,
upon a time, right?
definitely.
Yeah. And then you said she was definitely someone you could rely upon. And here it would make total sense to say on, right?
Exactly. This is that first meaning we shared where it's interchangeable with on. So you could
Mhm.
definitely say you could rely on. They have the same
Yeah.
meaning. This is just a little more formal.
Yeah. Okay. Then what did you say, Aubrey?
And then I said I was talking about using her journals to write this life sketch, which is you're sharing all kinds of details, information about her life during a funeral service. And I said
Mhm.
I based it upon her writing. So,
Yeah.
again, this first meaning where I could say I based it on her writing, but I'm being just a little bit more formal by saying based upon.
Yeah, and it's kind of elevating the event a little more, the
Yes.
work you've done. It's just sending gestures that this thing matters a little more, right?
Exactly. I love that. It's
Yeah.
amazing how just by saying upon
Ugh,
instead of on, there's that little bit of implied
tiny.
respect
Yeah.
and import, right? We're
Yeah,
we're
we
saying
love
this mattered. This was serious.
this is what we get into it here on All Ears English, Aubrey. We like to get into the nitty-gritty, these little tiny things that
Absolutely.
change the connection, change the meaning. The last thing I said here was, "I'm glad I could be here." Immediately upon arrival, I ran into someone from high school.
Yes, and that's that last meaning we talked about, right? Where you
Mhm,
could say, when I arrived, right? Immediately after I arrived, this happened. This is another way to
mhm.
say that. Immediately upon arrival, I ran into someone.
Yeah, and another scenario where I could imagine them using upon would be on an airline when the stewardess announces upon landing, your
Mhm.
baggage will be in gate 12, right? It's something
Yes,
like that.
absolutely, and
Mhm.
especially if she's reading from a card of something written, right? She doesn't wanna have to think
Mm.
about it, so often they just read the
Right.
flight instructions she's reading. Immediately upon arrival, check for your yeah, your,
Yeah.
details for your next flight.
Yeah, but although there are certain airlines that try to be more casual, like Southwest, they try to be more
Mm,
human. So maybe they would say when we land or
right?
when we touch down or so I don't know. I
That'd be
that
interesting to compare the formality and and pay attention to the feeling. Do I
yeah.
feel safer if they're speaking a little more formally, or do I like them being more friendly and casual?
Yeah, the flight that I was on this weekend, it was I think it was Southwest, and they were making jokes about, like, "If the oxygen mask drops, stop panicking," and like, oh my gosh, this is
Maybe I
probably
don't
not the
need you to
time
be
to make
joking
jokes.
about this,
Probably
right?
not. I know they wanna make jokes with their customers, but maybe that's not the right thing at this moment,
I
right?
know, especially where you have people who have, phobias of flying
Yes, I
that
know.
could be easily triggered. Like, let's not make jokes about the
Yeah,
plane
side point,
crashing.
but kind of inappropriate. Anyways, what's the takeaway for today, Aubrey, about upon and
Yeah,
on?
I loved this question. Prepositions in English can be very tricky, especially when they're similar, like upon and on, understanding exactly when you should use them or what it means when someone uses them. So, thank you again
Yeah.
for sending in this question. I'm glad we could dive into this.
Yeah, we're giving you guys the tools to just make a tiny turn to the right or to the left and dial up the formality, elevate something so it's right for one scenario, but it's not for another. So now that you guys know this, this is the way to connect, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Practice using it if you do want to add that little bit of formality and respect. And then keep
Hmm.
in mind that, like you were saying, Lindsay, if you're wanting to connect and you're in a casual conversation, you might want to opt for one of these other less formal options.
Yeah, I love it. Good stuff today, guys. If you love our style where we really look at the nuances of English and how it creates connection, then hit follow right here on this show. Right, Aubrey?
Yes, absolutely. Awesome, Lindsay. This was really fun.
All right, good stuff. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.